sponsors like these and the generosity that we're able to offer these seminars at no cost to our small businesses, so we're very grateful for that. And Andrew McLennan, the business banking officer with S&P Bank, and Deb Donkey, co-owner of Payroll Vault, are here. I want to invite them to say a few words. So I'll invite them up now. Andrew, do you want to start with Deb following?
Sure, and I'm going to be quick, even though Glenn said take a lot of time. So we're proud to be part of the sponsorship of these events. We really like the engagement. I'm glad to see there's quite a few people out here today for this meeting. So again, we're glad to help and support and look forward to these each year. So we thank y'all.
I'll second that. I think this is so important. The Chamber offers so many opportunities, but we work with clients every day that don't have the proper structure and they're not set up correctly. I'm Deb, like Carrie said. My husband and I own Payroll Vault. It's a dream, just like your dream is to start a new company. And we offer payroll and workforce solutions all from one platform. The great thing is that we believe in our clients. We work hand in hand with our clients. We offer the big boy technology, but the best thing is when you're in business, you gotta have somebody to support you in your back office. And so all of our customer service, everything is here in Western Kentucky. We have an office here in Houston and Annabelle, but we do payroll and HR, timekeeping, 401k, everything, all over the country. So if you have a dream, you're here today, you're starting your dream, believe in yourself, and then always put together your team and get your current structure correct from ground up. Believe you me, in 3 or 5 or 10 years, you'll thank yourself for attending this workshop and having your correct structure in your business. So if we can help you in any possible way, reach out to us. And thank you, Chamber, for putting on these workshops like this. It is essential to success in your own business and living your dream.
I want to say one more thank you to Jeff Pierce. He's the owner of Atomic City, but he's here videoing our seminar series this year. He's a Paducah Chamber board member, and so he's volunteering his time. He's actually done that with us for several years now, and we appreciate him. We post these videos on the Paducah Chamber's YouTube channel, so that way if small business owners were not able to attend due to their busy schedules, they can watch them later. And so I want to start the program and bring up Glenn Denton. He's going to be the moderator of our panel today. He's with Denton Law Firm. And then speakers, Andrew McLennan with S&P Bank and Mike Carnes with Williams Williams & Lynn.
I think I'm done.
Okay, let him start.
So, Carrie, if I've mastered this technology, I'm on, right?
Sounds like you are.
Beautiful. Good morning. My name is Glenn Denton. I'm with Denton Law Firm. And I want to first say thank you very much to F&B and to Payroll Vault. Putting these things together with the assistance of Carrie, it's important. Hope you all learned something today. For those of you that do not know me, I think I am funny. I've been told repeatedly that I am not funny.
Your wife didn't count.
Yeah, my wife does not count. And by the way, we tried to kind of drum up some attendance, and I asked my mom to be here today, and she didn't show up. So that'll tell you something. Please, at any point in time throughout the morning, if you would like free banking advice or free accounting advice, raise your hand. They will answer your questions. If it's legal, I will charge you. So that's just too bad for you all. But please ask questions at any point in time this morning. We would love that. So the title of this morning's seminar is a little bit short. It's a little bit too concise. LLCs versus sole proprietor. What we're really talking about here is business formation and the way that small businesses can be proactive in what it is that they do to position themselves to make more money, to have more success, to avoid risk. Those are the things that we're really going to talk about. Mike Carnes is 35 years old. He's been practicing accounting for 35 years. He has forgotten more about accounting than I'll ever know, and he would be a subject matter expert. Andrew McLennan has been in banking longer than I've been alive, because he is a very, very old man, and he has extreme expertise all the way around. Okay, I might be fudging a little bit, and so both of them can bring a wealth of knowledge to this seminar. I've been back in town and practicing law for about 30 years, and I love it. I really love it, but I will tell you, I love it because of the people, their ideas, and their enthusiasm. And I have seen businesses start very small and grow very big. I dealt with businesses very large, have very complex policies and procedures. And candidly, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. The fact of the matter is, I need to know what it is that you're doing, what you want to accomplish, and then that can provide the answer. So the way we're going to conduct this panel this morning is that I'm going to provide a bit of an overview on business formation, and then I'm going to pepper these two gentlemen with questions, and I hope you will do the same. So first and foremost, let's start at the very beginning. You have an idea, and you want to create a business. Okay, this is the start part of it. You don't know exactly what it is you want to do, but maybe it's just something simple like lawn care. Just start there. And so you think, I've got to buy a lawnmower, I need to go and find a customer, I need to sell my services to that person, I need to generate an invoice, I need to get paid. Okay? That's very simple, very straightforward. The fact of the matter is, if it is that simple and straightforward, being a sole proprietor, meaning you're doing all this business in your individual name, it's appropriate. It's where a lot of people start. Okay? Now, however, you have to acknowledge there's risk. What if something happens with the lawnmower? What if you run over something? What if a rock breaks a window? Things of that nature. So how do we avoid that risk? Well, the first way we would do that is with insurance. Okay? You go out and you get a good insurance policy that helps to defray and avoid some of that risk. All right? You think about that, you say that's enough. I have evaluated what risk I have, what reward I have. That is going to be my layer of defense. Then as you go on and you start hiring employees, now you have 10 different pieces of equipment. Now you have a truck. Now you're thinking, I need automobile insurance. Now you're thinking, I need workers' comp insurance. And you're beginning to think there's more and more risk here. Then all of a sudden you may think, no, I want to start with some sort of corporate formation, okay, incorporating, that is going to help protect some of my risk. How does it do that? Well, first and foremost, if you form a corporation, you're creating what they like to call in the law a corporate shield, okay? And that corporate shield says that I'm going to conduct business within that corporation. I'm going to act like a corporation. And if something goes wrong, it will be the responsibility of that corporation. It will not be the responsibility of me as an individual because I am protected from that. So therefore, they cannot get my shirts and my golf clubs and all the other stuff that I own. That is where your premise starts. There's different types of corporations, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But start there, pondering, how do I avoid risk? Now, in addition to this, there is also a tax complication, or perhaps a tax advantage. So, Mike, why don't you talk about the different ways that you can form a corporation and how you think about taxes when you're forming?
Okay, so from a corporate standpoint, you can either be a C corporation or an S corporation. C corporation is a regular corporation. It's the whenever you hear about corporation, that's the one they're talking about. All the tax, you pay the tax at the entity level. It doesn't affect the personal return, but then when you try to draw those earnings out, you're going to get hit with that double tax. The corporate rate right now is a flat 21%, but then when you dividend out that money, it's going to get hit with at least another 15, could be more depending on your income level. The S Corp, which is probably what I see the most, all the income flows through to the individual. The income is not considered self-employment income, so it doesn't, you don't have that separate tax on top of it. You do have to pay reasonable compensation, but IRS hasn't really defined what reasonable compensation is. So, all I know is it's not zero. Court cases that have the IRS, most of the court cases that they have tried to litigate has been more reasonable comp on a C Corp, and they're trying to keep it from being unreasonably high. So unreasonably low is not that big of a deal. And I think there's one thing I want to kind of, a misconception I want to kind of clear up. An LLC doesn't, from a tax standpoint, an LLC is not really a taxable structure. It's just a legal structure. So you can be an LLC, you can be a sole proprietor, you can be a partnership, or you can be a corporation. Years ago, IRS was in the litigation with a bunch of corporations on, they didn't think it was done right, so they decided to make it easier. One time they did actually make it easier. So you're an LLC, you just check a box and you make an election and get taxed any way you want to be taxed.
So Mike, when you're consulting with someone at the very front end, how often will they choose a corporate formation of some sort versus a sole proprietorship?
Usually if they're profitable, I'll steer them toward the S corp. Just because of that, like I said, that the sole proprietor, they're going to incur another level of tax, the self-employment tax, which is basically your Social Security that you have as an employee. It's basically the same thing. So that tax is 15%, except, when you're an employee, your employer pays half of it. When you're self-employed, you're paying both sides of it. So you're adding a 15% tax on top of your income tax. So yeah, that's most of the time, unless it's a rental company, then I'm going to steer them toward an S corp.
So let's talk about terminology for a half second. So let's say that you make the decision that you're going to form a corporation, okay? Or you're going to form a limited liability company. The terminology gets kind of important. So if it is XYZ Inc., that probably tells you they have formed as a corporation using articles of incorporation, and they probably have something called bylaws to help them govern themselves. But what if you form an LLC? Well, the terminology changes just a little bit. Now we're using something that's very similar, articles of organization, and the bylaws document is now called an operating agreement. Again, how do you govern and conduct your affairs as a corporation? First, can you do this online all by yourself using some sort of legal Zoom? Yes, you absolutely can. Will lawyers make more money cleaning up the mess that you have made after you've done that by yourself? Yes, they will. Because the fact of the matter is you want to get it right, because when you create your corporation, you want to make sure that you act and conduct yourself like a corporation. So many folks that I see immediately go to the Kentucky Secretary of State, they form their corporation, and then they stop. They never do anything else. They have no corporate formalities. They have no bylaws or operating agreement. They don't have a corporate book. They don't have any stock certificates. They don't know how to sign a document to make sure they're reflecting they're doing this in their corporate capacity as opposed to their individual name. So those are things that go on all the time. So my question to Andrew is that when that business goes in to the bank and they say, we want to get a loan, what are the things that what are the questions you're going to pepper them with right out of the gate?
Wow, nothing like loading right off the bat.
Right off the bat, here we go.
So basically, what we run into, and a lot of times you're going to find this happens, is if you just created your LLC and you walk into the bank and you say, I want to get a loan right now for my business, it's going to be very hard. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be very hard because there's not a 2-year track record history of you being in business. So the way some banks
accomplish that, the personal guarantee comes into more strength on that from that aspect, but it is very hard when you first initially decide, I'm going to form this business and I'm going to do this. Some people do a 180 venture where they were nursing and then now they want to go into being, a designer or something, just a 180 from what their normal core functions are. That's really tough for banking too, so not being negative on that aspect, but I mean, it's, we try to find ways to help businesses work, but, first thing you want to do when you set your business up is set up your banking accounts. You're going to need to come in and see us, like Glenn said. If it's an incorporation, bring your bylaws. If it's a LLC, bring, the operation agreement. But what we typically find is sometimes those documents are even vague, and you may have to have a barring resolution to identify if there's not a sole source member, or if there's 2 members, 3 members, 4. What we run into is if there's more than 1 member, we've got to define at the banking level who's signing the documents, who's authorized to sign, and does everybody have to sign? So in that scenario, to giving you that, again, I'm not trying to go way down the weeds, but it's, you can sign that borrowing resolution if there's 3 members and say, X member is the managing member and they can sign on behalf of us. So that could actually be a one-time use document for that one transaction, or it could be a blanket document that's used forever with the bank. But, we don't see that a lot, but you need to talk to your attorney, because typically it's per transaction, if you will. But when you come in, you've got to bring in your driver's license. You need to bring in your IRS letter showing your EIN number, especially if you're a brand new entity that you've just formed, so the bank can understand, here's your EIN, we need to know the structure. So if you don't have those operating agreements and or the bylaws, we've got to figure out, who's on the account, who owns this entity, if you will. So, I know it's kind of a long way to answer the question, but, there's things that we use called a beneficial owner, where like a managing member will sign that form stating, here's all 3 members, here's their information, here's their social security numbers, here's everything related to this. In banking, and again, I didn't know if Ben or one of them might be heckling here before too long, but it's pretty much we have to know who we're dealing with, because, we are regulated heavily, if you will, from the standpoint of we've got to know who the customer is, and we've got to know the source of the funds coming into the bank, so we can, legitimately take care of that. So hopefully that wasn't a too long-winded of an answer.
Spot on. So one of the things that we said that we would try and accomplish, I see a young man raising his hand.
Got 2 questions, sorry. One, I want to go back, you caught me on something, you said unless you're rental. So I'm curious about that.
Okay, well, I think with a rental being a partnership or that, so with a partnership, one of the big benefits of a partnership is that you can liquidate it tax-free. Also, with a partnership, rental income is not considered self-employment income. So with a rental, I always want the rental companies that I work with, to be LLCs, taxed as a partnership. A corporation can't liquidate tax-free. That's one of the drawbacks of it.
Second question.
Second question, so you're talking about forming the business, the people that go online and set up the LLC. How important is it in name selection as far as, you're coming up with a business name and it's A Plus Plumbing, but maybe there's an A Plus Plumbing 3 counties away. Does that matter? How does that go into effect? I'm just curious.
Name selection is always interesting. People come up with very interesting corporate names, named after their kids, named after their dog, named after funny things, and then there are some that are so generic like XYZ Inc., things of that nature. When you go online to try and select a name, if that name is already taken, then you're not going to be able to get that name. So what most people do is then they say, but I really want it, so I'm not going to be XYZ Inc., I will be XYZ Advantaged Inc. And so they vary it just a little bit. What I generally tell folks is that if there is a name that is somewhere close, you don't want confusion, okay? And some will say, well, that's because you don't want to step on their toes, this, that, and the other. No, I have literally had lawsuits where a lawyer has named one of my clients because of their corporate name, because they're confused, and they meant to sue that one over there. So it takes a little bit of time, money, and effort to get you extricated from that, even though it was a pure mistake. So when you're thinking about the name, I want clarity. I want to make sure I'm not causing any problems and things of that nature. It's a true consideration. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe an add-on to that. Maybe explain to everybody what the difference is in a corporate name and a DBA.
So you can operate as a sole proprietor and then simply use a doing business as name and identify that's the way you're doing business. By the way, a corporation can also use a DBA, doing business as. So you can choose an entirely different name, selecting that as what you do, the umbrella that you do business under, but your corporate name is something different. So it could be XYZ Inc., doing business as Glenn's Lawn Care Services, things of that nature.
What kind of filing requirements with that, the DBA? Is there anything?
There is one small filing requirement that comes along, and it's rather simplistic. Other questions? So let's talk for a half second about the actual formation. So you will file with the Kentucky Secretary of State's office. You also file with the McCracken County Clerk's office. You will then execute your bylaws, your operating agreement. You would probably have an initial meeting of the corporation to say, we're going to select a bank, provide an authorization to do business with a bank, things of that nature. You probably can create a corporate minute book, begin in the habit of having at least a corporate meeting once a year where you say this is what the corporation did this year. There are certain little formalities. Two other formalities. One, if you choose to conduct yourself as a corporation, there is an annual report that has to be filed with the Kentucky Secretary of State's office. It's rather simplistic, it's easy to file online, and it costs $15. Now, if you happen to forget to file that form, then you will be administratively dissolved, which means that you've got to get reinstated and you move forward. That can trip you up at times. Banks don't like to see corporations that are administratively dissolved, so that's another piece to it. Then there's a new piece, and relatively new meaning January 1. So there is a new federal law out there called the Corporate Transparency Act. And so this act says that the federal government, through the United States Department of Treasury, FinCEN, they want to know who are the beneficial owners of this corporation. So that is an additional form that you have to file online with FinCEN, and you have to provide a driver's license and who owns the corporation. The reason is that the federal government became concerned about people forming an LLC, using their lawyer as the incorporator, perhaps their lawyer as the registered agent, so you didn't know who owned that LLC. That is relatively new, like so many different laws. It immediately got entangled in court, and so it has been enjoined in many different ways. And so we are currently complying with that law. It's not very difficult. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. But for some people that don't want their personal information known by the federal government, that's going to be an issue. Okay? So as we're going through and thinking about all of these different things and trying to be proactive and giving you all the proactive steps of what you can do, step number one is analyzing your risk. Okay? For example, let's say that there's someone here that is in the food and catering business. Okay? That person may say, hey, if something goes wrong, people get sick because of the food, they want to protect themselves against that risk. Analyze the risk. That's step one. Two, immediately think about your insurance coverage. And then three, think about the corporation, the forming of it. Now, with all those things being said, all is going well, and then all of a sudden our business begins to grow. And so now it's growing, and we'll take the lawn care business, and now we're up to 10 different pieces of equipment, etc. Mike, can you kind of speak to depreciation and some of the things that a corporation can do to help mitigate taxes?
Okay, so with the Trump Tax Act that was passed, I guess, I don't know when it was passed, 5 or 6 years ago, I guess. The bonus depreciation rules came into effect, and really, basically, you can expense anything you want to expense, any piece of equipment. It was a sliding scale, and it is set to sunset at the end of 2025. But then there's also Section 179 where you can make an election to expense any kind of equipment that you have, that you buy. So it's the important part is putting it in service. But yeah, you can pretty much expense most of your equipment that you buy for a business. I think the thing you have to kind of look at, though, it's not always a good idea to expense everything. Zero taxable income is not always a good thing. You kind of want to see where you're going to be in the future. You might get a bigger benefit by pushing that depreciation expense to a future year. Banks get kind of antsy sometimes when you have zero income for a bunch of years, even if it is depreciation.
So I think one of the things that we need to write down, if we're going to take 5 takeaways from this morning, your fourth one is going to be this. Get yourself a good CPA or someone that can talk you through tax issues, forward thinking, trying to be proactive. What can we do? Should we do it or should we not do it? That's a really important piece, because the fact of the matter is, a lot of people say, I don't want to incur that expense. I don't want to do it that way. I'll go online and things of that nature. But candidly, in my experience, a good CPA is worth his or her weight in gold. So, with that being said, the fifth item is you need a good banking partner. I hope each of you hit the lottery, and so you never need to take a loan or anything else. But the fact of the matter is, you do need a good banking partner. And so, Andrew, as we've talked about forming a corporation and we're protected and whatnot, can you speak to personal guarantees? So if I form this corporation and everything else, what's the danger of the personal guarantee? And why do banks want them?
Sure. So you've got your business, XYZ, lawn care. I'm not picking on lawn care, but so you've got your business and you come to the bank and you want to get a loan, and you've got a 2 or 3 year track record history. So, you want to buy some mowers, you want to buy a truck or something for your business. So we're going to be looking, the borrower will be the entity, and then we're going to be looking for those additional personal guarantees. And so what that actually does is it gives the bank that assurance if the entity fails, you dissolve it or something like that, that we actually have, your personal guarantee is on the hook as well. There's some variances between different banks. Some banks will require spousal additional guarantees as well. And that's usually joint and several, for those personal guarantees, which means you take out a $50,000 loan for the business, the husband and wife individually, or the two spouses, will sign personal guarantees, and they'll be up to $50,000 apiece as well. So it gives the banks that extra assurance if something happens to the entity that we have somebody to go back to help pay the loan. And there's a big misconception on the bank because you've got my collateral. Banks, the way we underwrite loans, we're not collateral lenders. We take the collateral to make the deal. We look at the cash flow of the business. And we also want to look at the way the business, the income coming in on the business. So when you get that loan for that lawn care for that $50,000 truck, that loan would be the project. So we want to see if there's enough cash flow coming into the business to at least be a 1 to 120 coverage, meaning if there's $1 in debt, there's $1.20 of net income to be able to support that payment back to the bank. If there's not, and like I talked about earlier, where if you're a new business and you don't have the 3 years to support it or something like that, we look at the personal guarantee to make up the difference. So if you have a very high net worth, you have a very high W-2 wages, this is a part-time income or something like that, we can make up the difference. But that's how the personal guarantees come into play, because sometimes the business, if it's newer, may not take care of the project cost, if you will, covering it from that aspect.
When the bank does present you a personal guarantee, it might not be a bad idea to have your attorney look at that as well. Years ago, I had a client that signed an open-ended personal guarantee, and then later on, it's probably 10 years later, there was a loan that they defaulted on, or he signed it for another company. He was just a shareholder in. But that a loan defaulted there that didn't have anything to do with what he signed a personal guarantee on. And he ended up having to fork over the money for that guarantee, or that loan. So be careful.
So as we're going through and providing these different proactive steps that you go through, you've got to notice, as a small business owner, there's an expense associated with each of these. It's an expense to talk to the lawyer. There's an expense to talk to the CPA. There's an expense to go to the bank and borrow money. All right, all of those are expenses. However, you've got to figure out, is that expense worth it? And if I pay this over here, can I spend my time doing something proactive to create revenue over here? If you're trying to, and again, I'm just lawn care at the moment, if you're trying to cut yards, if you're inside trying to figure out your taxes, you're not creating any revenue. And so that leads me to one more item that I want to bring up, and that is payroll. Payroll, everybody's going to say QuickBooks because their cousin does QuickBooks, their grandmother does QuickBooks, everybody does QuickBooks, this and the other. Payroll is a landmine, and you can do it well, or you cannot do it well. And when you start receiving notices from the state or the federal government that your payroll has gone astray, you are immediately begin to think of, how could I outsource this to some entity like payroll? And so, Mike, have you ever had a client that's ever run into a payroll issue?
You know, occasionally you'll run into a client that think they can finance their business by using their payroll taxes, and I can tell you, that is not a very good way to do it. Don't get behind on payroll taxes. It's hard to get caught up, and the penalties that the IRS imposes for even being a day or two late, it's pretty incredible. You got to be really careful with that. So yeah, and I tell you that QuickBooks is not the answer for everything, especially anymore, because they've had a monopoly, I think, for a long, or they've almost created a monopoly, and they realize it now, and so they're kind of, you're playing in their playground now, in their field, and their costs are going up. I know we see it every day. I mean, I think they've gone up about 4 times, I think, this year. And also the people that use the desktop versions, they're in the process of eliminating that. You got to go to their online version, which their online version is not anything like their desktop version. I know the girls in our office that do those things. Yeah, if they have a client comes in with QuickBooks Online, they're moaning. They're not liking it too well.
Andrew, same question. Ever had a borrower come in with any payroll issues, state tax lien, federal?
Yes. So, I mean, that sends up red flags to the bank, you know, because we're going to be looking at different things from that aspect. When you apply for those loans, you know, as you've heard Glenn mention, we're going to be checking to make sure that your entity is in good standing with the state of Kentucky. When you apply for those business accounts and personal accounts, there is a third-party process that does kind of review, you know, when you put your EIN, you put your social security number in, and we get reports back to the bank that says, XYZ, this person has had 3 accounts closed by this bank, and this bank. So there are mechanisms out there that show, you know, you've got to keep your banking accounts in good standing. The taxes, you know, that's another big thing that it represents a liability because, again, it might be a one-time issue and explainable, but the bank looks at it as, are they an absentee owner? Are they out over their skis? Do they know what they're doing? And so, you know, that might prohibit you from being able to get those additional funds if you need something, if there's payroll tax issues and other things that pop up for your business.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I have a tax question. Jeff and I, when we first got our real estate license, that we used the same CPA that had done our regular taxes, and then we found out that he didn't draw out enough. So can you explain how important it is to ask the right questions? Because doing your regular taxes at the end of the year is totally different than a CPA knows how to do like a small business. And then if it's done wrong, then we pay the penalties, the CPA doesn't. You know what I mean? Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Usually, if I make a mistake on somebody's return, I'm paying the penalties. And I think what's important, I'm not sure I understood your question fully, but you know, it's really important. I know most of my clients that they're coming in at the end of the year, maybe November or December, and we do tax planning, and we try. I don't like surprises. and I don't like them personally, and I don't like making those phone calls on April 14th and 15th and telling somebody how much they owe. I don't enjoy that conversation. It's just not fun. But no, it's important to get a CPA that knows businesses. Not all of them do. There's a shortage of CPAs right now, accountants, really, and it's hard to find them. It's hard to get them out of college, and they're not really coming out of college. I'm not sure and I guess that's the same problem everybody has with, not just in this profession, but all of them. But it's tough. I'd like to retire right now, but I can't. Yeah, I'm not 35, as Glenn said.
So I have one client, and he refers to the lawyer, the CPA, the banker. That's his team. These are the group of advisors that he surrounds himself with that give him guidance. He doesn't always listen to the guidance, I'll tell you that, but he has his core team that knows his business and he bounces ideas off of. I love that because it's proactive. Because the worst thing that can happen is to have a reactive situation. Here's what I did or I forgot to do. Can you help me fix this? The help me fix this cost to any situation is higher than the proactive one. And so some people feel very comfortable having that team of trusted advisors. Others feel like, no, every time I ask a question, it makes me feel like I'm not as smart as I should be about my own business. I disagree with that. When it comes to my health care, I listen to my team of advisors, my primary physician, my eye doctor, the guy that checks my hearing and everything else. I listen to them, and I don't try and say, well, I've mastered this all on my own. Some people can warm up to that concept, others cannot. And so as you are creating your business, one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, tell me who your lawyer is. Who did you work with before? Who's your accountant? Who is your banker? And sometimes just based upon those answers, I can tell you whether or not, they've really formed a good team. Who's your lawyer? I don't have a lawyer. Well, I did have a lawyer. It was a divorce lawyer. Sometimes I call them. Really? You're in the rocket science business and you're calling your divorce lawyer. Interesting. What about your accountant? Don't use an accountant. What do? Well, I go to Walmart and they have a service out there. Okay, I've got that understood as well. Who's your banker? Well, Rocket Mortgage. As you go through those things, it just kind of tells me how you are approaching business. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just tells me a little something. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this is the right wording, but I inherited a corporation. And what they did with this is no longer needed in the area. So would it be feasible, and they have a great track record and history as far as, to go to the bank, to get a loan, and so forth. But I'm wanting to change the name to fit what is needed now and not what was needed then. So would it be feasible for me to just keep the name or change it, being that it has the great track record, or would they be able to see that track record with the EIN number versus me wanting to do what I suggested?
So the answer to your question is yes. You absolutely can change the name. You could do it through the DBA. You could do it through a formal name change, this, that, and the other. But the entity that you have inherited remains the same, just the name. And that EIN is what the bank is going to take a look at in terms of how has this corporation conducted itself, what is its track record. So you can absolutely accomplish that goal. Yeah. Good question. Other questions? So we met yesterday briefly to try and think, what it is that you all might find of interest, and sometimes a war story is of interest. And so I'd like to give you one. This is a true story. It blew me away. You too might like this story. I had a client comes in. He is in his early 50s, and we're having a conversation, and he says, hey, well, I've got your ear. Let me ask you a question. Short, he said, my son has started a business. And I know his son. I said, that's wonderful. And I said, what's he doing? He said, well, he's selling this product. And I said, that's great. He said, I really think that he may need to incorporate. He's in high school. I'm like, okay, well, typically, may not be ready for incorporation, that type of thing, but, how's he doing? He goes, he's doing great. He's got all this business going on. He's got $35,000 in cash up in his room at the house. He now had my interest. First, it's a legal business. Don't anybody go there, okay? I was impressed. So we called him in, and we sat down and said, I'm going to treat him just like any other adult and walk through it. I was blown away at the sophistication and knowledge that this young man had. And even though I started with a prejudice of thinking he's a young man, it's a high school business, it can't be that good, it's a solid business. Immediately changed. Yes, we will get you incorporated. Yes, we're going to get you to a CPA, this, that, and the other, because his business had grown to the point of that was the inflection point. It was time. And so as you're kind of going through this, there are those stories where you start small and you grow, but there's an inflection point. And so I'm kind of wondering, Mike or Andrew, have you ever had one of those moments where you've got a business that they're small and all of a sudden the big contract lands, the big customer lands, where everything changes? Got one of those stories?
Well, I've got one that kind of went the other way, I guess. I think any business owner has to be careful about growing too fast. I think I had a client years ago who's a contractor. He wanted to be big in the worst way, and he got big in the worst way. He started taking jobs in areas that he didn't know anything about. He was moved dirt, and he took a job somewhere in Tennessee moving some dirt. It was a fixed price contract, and there was a bunch of rock. So you have to be really careful. You can go the other way too. But no, I think that as far as working with clients, I had one that I got called in years ago to help them design an accounting system. They wanted to keep track of their inventory. And at that time, they were they just started. It's like, I think it was 1986. They just started, they had like $3 million in sales. Now they're up over $100 million in sales. And the best part about it, they even hired my daughter, so she's off my payroll, so that's really helped. But no, yeah, you do see those. That's the fun part about this, is seeing a client that went from that, a small startup all the way into being really successful and working with the succession planning, because that's really important too. That's the area that a lot of people don't want to deal with. What happens when something happens to me and the next generation has to come in? And it's tough. It really is, moving to that other generation.
Andrew, a war story where that inflection point hits?
Sure. So to kind of set the stage, so when you open that business, you can actually, if you're, depending on what you're looking at, if it's vehicles, if it's real estate, there's some unique ways. I don't want to say creative, but there's other ways. If you're buying a house, everything is pretty much, it's this, and this. Commercial lending for the business has a little bit more flexibility, and we can make loans on accounts receivable. We can make loans against FF&E related items, different things, your vehicles and inventory, if there's equity in those. So my story is, we were working with a large general contractor that historically for the last 15 years or more had contracts stating, millions of dollars, and we were working with that. Well, during the process of setting the loan up, getting to closing, remember we've talked about, we need to know who is in that entity, because if things change, that change who signs the documents. My war story is, we were 2 days from closing, and they needed their line of credit to get the bond, to pay for the bond for the next year. They sold 25% of the company 3 weeks, basically about the time when they applied for the loan. hid it from us at the bank. And so like 2 days before the closing, we found out the structure's changed. That changes everything because 25% ownership means, the bank looks at that individual person because there will probably be a guarantee and everything else. So that's kind of my war story is, again, when you start something, make sure and that's why we're not being nosy. If you sat down with any banker asking all these questions, we have to understand the structure, who's in it and what's going on. And I had one question, and I hope it wasn't a loaded question from one of you all, because so it's like somebody asked me a while ago, and they said, and again, from the banking standpoint, they asked me, can you expand on why I have a personal account at your bank and my business XYZ rental, I've got a check made to that, and you won't let me put that in your account, in my personal account. Wow, okay. So just think of it from this aspect. The bank, if we do not have that business account on file, we don't know if XYZ rental is owned by you as a sole source proprietorship, if there's 2 partners, 3, 5, 6, 10, whatever. So if we put that check in there and you pull the funds out of your personal account and you move it somewhere else, and your 2 business partners come in and say, hey, I didn't authorize him to get that check and he stole that from us, the bank's in trouble because you had a personal account, but yet a business check went through. So I know, again, there's a lot of pain with that when you go to the banks and you see a lot of people very mad and frustrated, but that's the reason is if you've got a business, you need a business account, but you also need a personal account, and banks will not let you cross over those transactions.
Oh, quick, actually, it's 2 questions. If you guys are talking about like a new business, it's a little bit more difficult to get a loan, right? Let's say I lawn care business, just started out year 1. I get a contract with, let's say, a restaurant, chain restaurant around town. Have a contract, then realize I need a little bit more equipment. Am I able to come to you guys and be like, hey, I need this equipment, I know I'm new. Would I need to bring you like a contract to say like, hey, this is kind of my, I guess for lack of a better term, collateral?
And that comes along with typically the short answer would be if you haven't been in business 2 years, it is hard.
Yeah.
But, we look for mitigating factors to try to help offset if you've not been in business for 2 years, for example. So we're going to be looking personally at you. We're going to be looking at your prior year's tax returns. We're going to be looking at like your net worth. Do you have cash, other assets? Just to help make the deal more solid, if you will, if you're a brand new business. And again, I will say from the banking perspective, everybody that starts their business, as they've alluded to, wants to pay 0 taxes and make no money. It makes it very hard.
They don't make money, they don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah, you don't want to pay taxes. So, you're going to need to show some kind of profit or the ability to show a profit if you want to borrow money as that business.
Do an income projection that might be helpful too.
Yes. So we look at contracts, we look at different things like that, Now, on that contract, it may have a 30-day out clause, which means you're only good for 30 days, something like that. But if it doesn't have a clause in there and they're going to pay you for a year regardless if if they fire you or whatever. So, I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios like that could change how the bank might look at that.
Okay. I also had another one where you were talking about that gentleman that sold 25% of his company. I guess this is a question for any of you. At what point does a business either see it necessary to sell part of their business, or would you recommend them to sell part of their business?
Well, I'll answer it from the banking side. We see it a lot if people are at the end of their ability to borrow money, they need working capital, they bring on those additional partners that might bring that strength to the deal. So that's when we typically see something like that, or you and competitor may want to get together and form, join it as one entity, if you will. So that's how we see it in the banking side, but, not sure on.
This doesn't have anything to do with tax, but when you bring on partners, you bring on a lot more headaches. I've got 5 partners. There's times I want to kill them. And I'm sure
Mike,
there's times they wanna
Mike, this
kill
is being
me too.
recorded.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
Hey, take that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I've had times where 2 friends went in as partners. They went in as friends. They came out as, they don't even talk to each other anymore. You have to be very careful with partners. So to me, that would be a last resort. I mean, if I could get the money some other way, of course, it is a financing decision, but that would be a last resort for me. I might even start using my payroll taxes before I would do that. I'm just kidding.
So I will tell you, our firm does not do any divorce work, okay? However, when you have 2 partners that split, boy, it feels like a divorce. I've done it in the veterinary setting. I've done it in basically a hair salon. I've done it with doctors' offices. Doctors' offices are really next level. But when you bring them on, that's great. But when you bring them on, it's the happy honeymoon, lovey-dovey phase. You're great, I'm great, we're going to make so much money, everything's wonderful. And they never ask the question, well, if we fall out of love, how do we do this in a very amicable type of way? They never get to that piece. And then when it happens, it feels like a divorce. So your question was, when do you know when to bring them on? It's really a business decision. There may be somebody so talented that you want them to be part of your company and succeed, or that may be part of your succession plan. Sell it off to them. But if you're going to make that decision, please consider, well, if things don't go well, this is how we would want this to occur. Good question. Other questions?
It's not really related necessarily to what you're saying or what you've asked, but if you do bring that person on and you are incorporated, get a buy-sell agreement in place. I mean, it's always important to do that.
So the title of this small business seminar began with Start, Run, Grow. And what we hope we've done today is provide you all with some proactive steps that you all can take with your business to kind of think about how to do that, how to start, how to run, how to grow. I know Andrew, Mike, and I will all be around for questions afterwards. But we want to thank you for attending. We want to thank the Paducah Area Chamber of Commerce, and in particular, thank F&B and Payroll Vault for sponsoring this event this morning. Thank you all very much.
Let's give another round of applause, please. Thank you again to our sponsors, F&B Bank and Payroll Vault. Thank you all for spending your morning with us. We hope to see you again. If you haven't already registered for the additional seminars, there's a flyer in the back that you can pick up to learn about those topics. And again, thank you.